Okay, so it is the second time that we're working on this thing. We got it all set up, and we are doing what I was mentioning in the last video, where you have to put the torque converter on the transmission before you bolt it to the engine. So see this spline here, you can kind of see this notch. It has to line with two little notches in there. So what you do is you put this on. You can kind of look and see there's a peg in there. Mine, one of the pegs here and the other one's there. So you get it close. You kind of spin it, rotate it, it clunks in. And then you put the whole transmission with the torque converter installed, and the pump gear, this is the pump gear, already engaged. Then you bring it up, and you're gonna see these 6 studs on the bottom like that. I think it's 6. Yeah, 6 studs, and it lines up with this flex plate. So you see the holes in the flex plate, and you see this hole here, and you're gonna access it through the back. So you're gonna put all those bolts on there, and then from the back you have to put these nuts on the torque converter to tighten it down to the flex plate, and you hold everything with a breaker bar on the actual crankshaft from the front. So that's how you got to do it. We're gonna go ahead and fire this on and put it on. So let's go ahead. Okay, so we got the torque converter fully engaged. The way you can tell, there's a few people that's kind of spec'd it out, that you see this pad here. The base of the pad has to be about 1 inch from the face of the transmission. So if you have about 1 inch gap there and you've spun it and it seems to be all the way engaged, because you can put it on and then you'll feel it, you turn it and you feel it clunk in a second time, and that's with that pump gear actually engaging on those two tabs inside. And like I said, if this this pad is about 1 inch from the face of the transmission, that means you're fully seated, and we can go ahead and throw this on here. So next we're gonna go ahead and fire this on here, and we gotta line it up. Hopefully you guys can see that. You gotta line it up with the holes here, these 6 studs with these 6 holes, and do the painstaking job of turning this and tightening each one, all 6, through the back here, and that should get us lined up. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys that. It's gonna be a pain, but we'll get it done and continue. So hopefully you guys can see this. I'm trying to get light in there, but that is where you have to stick a extension with a socket to get at the flex plate and the bolts on the back. So we just have it in there, and the transmission is not bolted, but we got the flex plate lined up with the torque converter, and we're just rotating it over here, getting it lined up and putting each nut on, because it is a pain to get everything lined up. So we're getting that all lined up, and then we'll get the transmission bolted, fully bolted to the engine. So we're gonna continue with that. Okay, so the engine's bolted to the transmission. We got it all, the bolts tightened, and this is what happens when you leave Omar with a dartboard and a praying mantis. This is the luckiest praying mantis alive. Omar tried throwing every dart at this praying mantis, and he didn't even budge. And he still couldn't hit him. We are now on to day 2 of the second part of this rebuild. And we got the engine in last night. It's just sitting here with this motor mount and this motor mount, with these 2 bolts on this side and the 2 bolts on this side. And we did the same method where we had the engine on this furniture dolly and use these 2 jacks to lift it up and get the 2 bolts in, suck it up. I don't have the transmission. There's a mount on the bottom, so you can see what this engine's just rocking here. So there's one more mount that goes on the bottom that ties it to the frame that I haven't done yet. But this is all this part. We're gonna go ahead and just hook up all these hoses. Just gonna motor through most of the stuff, guys. Like I said, just a million coolant hoses and whatnot, and electrical stuff. So I'm gonna start hooking all that stuff up as quickly as I can, so that we can put some power to it and see if she'll fire up. So this is the coolant temperature sensor, which was from the car, I guess, before all this happened, or not before all this happened, before I got to it. Whatever strange people working on this had electrical taped, a ton of electrical tape on here, and siliconed it in an effort to try to make this thing work. Because I was looking at the the connection on the old wiring harness, or the old sensor. So it's supposed to go here for the coolant, and they had taped and siliconed it and put all this junk on it that I'm trying to get off so that I can unclip this one from the new engine. This is just where they cut it off, and I can clip this back on, but I don't know what the heck they got on here. So I'm gonna try to remove all this stuff so that I can finally clip this on and clean this up. Okay, so here's where we are. We have most of the electrical and hoses all connected to the engine within itself, and next we have to put the core support and the rebar back on, and it looks like everything should straighten up and bolt up nice. I did have to fiddle a little bit with these because they were slightly bent. Nothing like, I don't want to even call it structural, because it was just like the ears on these things were bent, so they had this one sticking up or sorry, this one was back and these ones were kicked out forward, resulting in the rebar being up. And then same thing, just kind of the tabs on this, the ears on this actual rebar were just kind of a little bit off, enough to push this maybe half an inch or an inch higher on the one side, and same thing on this. So I just messed around a little bit, straightened them out, and like I said, it wasn't structural. It wasn't like this was compressed or anything like that, just these ears on there. So we just kind of flattened those out. Did the same thing with this side, flattened all these faces out so that it can bolt on. And I'm gonna go ahead and bolt this onto the front of the car, connect those hoses. I could keep going with, you know, body work and stuff, but I really want to fire this engine up, make sure it works. So I'm gonna put this on enough to get it there, and then hook up the remaining coolant lines, so just the ones to the radiator, and then I'm gonna try and actually fire this thing and make sure all this hard work is going to good use. So let's go ahead and get that done. I'm gonna put this on. Hopefully, I'm hoping that this lines up a little bit better than it did before, and then go ahead and connect those hoses, throw the battery in, and see what we got. So after a lot of messing around, we finally have the car in a state where it runs. And I say that with complete skepticism, because the car kind of freaked me out a little bit when I first started it up. And the reason being was it when I started it up, there was like smoke billowing out the exhaust. And well, it first started up, to begin with, it fired it up, no hesitation. But once I started it up, it was just billowing white smoke out the tailpipe, probably about after 30 seconds to a minute. And I immediately shut it down, thought there was something wrong with it. Maybe something wrong with this engine, something wrong with the turbo, whatever. But I started getting a little bit, I guess a little bit discouraged would be the correct word. And I slept on it. And then the following day, which is today, I decided to try one thing where I disconnected the exhaust from the turbo just to see if it was smoking the same kind of smoke I was seeing at the tailpipe, if it was coming directly out of the turbo. Right from the engine. So I started up, it was super loud, but to my, I guess, relief, it was actually not smoking anymore. So what it ended up being is whatever was going on with the previous engine and whoever had whatever going on with it, there was a ton of just something stuck in the exhaust pipe, whether it was water, oil, a mixture, a combination of both, and whatever else could have found its way or crept its way in there from that car sitting for a little while. But I bolted the exhaust back on, started it, and now it works. It starts right up. It sounds perfect, no issues. But we do have some check engine lights that we're gonna try to nail down. There's a few codes. Transmission, no codes. I'm just checking the level on it because I'm putting fluid in it. It was actually down quite a bit on fluid, and to check the transmission fluid on this is kind of a pain. You have to find, there's actually a proper tool where, if I can explain this as easily as possible. So here's the pan, right? There's no dipstick on these transmissions, and what happens is there's a drain plug right here, and the drain plug has kind of a spout in it, and so the spout is a calculated length. So for example, the drain plug goes in, and then there's an insert with a spout that sticks up. I almost want to call it a snorkel, but it goes up, and you can remove that snorkel or spout. You can unscrew that as well, and you have to actually to drain the fluid completely, but I was just topping it up. So there's that snorkel or spout in there, and it's probably somewhere along the lines of here. I haven't taken this one out, so I don't know exactly how tall or long it is. But you have to fill the fluid, and there's a special tool with a hose that you can fill it back through that spout.
but a lot of people will do what I'm doing, which is find something on the top, whether it's a bolt or a sensor or something like that, take it out from the top, fill it up at the top, and then check it. And what you have to do is get the engine running, get it up to a certain temperature. I think it's between 35 and 45 degrees Celsius, and you have to check it with a scan tool. And you remove this bolt, and if there's just a trickle coming out, you're good. If there's a flow, then you have to wait for it to drain because it's too high. So that's what we're doing right now, just topping it up, finishing that up. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put the headlights back in and put this bumper back on. I have some pieces for the bumper that were missing. So I'm gonna go ahead and assemble that bumper. I got the grille and I got the lower, I think this is kind of the lower valence they're calling it. And this is the lower grille. I also have the upper grille as well that I had to purchase. So we have those three. We're gonna put them in the bumper since we just have this gaping hole of a bumper right now. But first off, get a few more of these things sorted out. I'm gonna finish up with the transmission fluid so I can get the bumper and the headlights back on and hopefully looking like a car by the end of today. Okay, let's try and put this grille and all these pieces into this bumper to make it complete. So right now it looks like that. Okay, so the bumper is obviously assembled. Still have to do the headlights and the other stuff, but at least the bumper looks complete now. The front end clip. By the way, that is the cheapest front bumper assembly I've ever seen in my life. It's all plastic and just like all these super cheesy little clips. Like, yeah, they definitely don't make things like they used to, because that thing is like the biggest piece of plastic I've ever seen in my life. But on to other things. We're gonna try and fit the headlights in here, try to get them sorted out. I'm waiting for the transmission to cool down because it has to be within that temperature range, and it's still not there yet with being so hot out today. These two AC lines, I'm guessing right now that they didn't buy the right condenser, or something's a little bit weird because these lines don't seem to really want to fit inside of there. So I have to double check some stuff, but it almost seems as like this is the incorrect condenser for this. It's a bit too early for me to tell yet. I gotta do some more investigation, but these don't really fit in here. I mean, they will bolt up, but where this is and where that lines up to, this indent, this circle indent right here, you guys can see this circle indent is too big to fit inside of here. So something's going on here. I still gotta research this mystery that these guys left me with, but this doesn't seem to be the right setup here, or either that or maybe that's just the way it sits, but it doesn't seem right. You can kind of see a mark here where it was sitting on the outside but wouldn't have made a seal. So I gotta figure out what's going on there before we continue on that part. But for now I'm just going to zip tie them out of the way until I do more research, figure out what's going on there. We got this piece installed, so things are a lot more solid up here because this was missing as well. There's lots of stuff, but that was definitely missing. And we'll keep going here. So let's go ahead and try out those headlights, see if we can get them situated, and continue. Okay, so I have both headlights in now. I don't proclaim to be any sort of body guy, so this is best I'm gonna do it. And I think I was mentioning earlier, I'll probably end up sending this to a body shop if all goes well, to get them to actually line everything up and fix up any little things that need to be painted. But that's about as good as I can get it on this side. This was the side that didn't endure any sort of crash, and then here's the side that did have the crash. And it's not terrible. I think it's half decent for what it is. Hopefully the bumper lines up, but I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination anyways. So that's what I got. I'm gonna go ahead and try throwing this bumper on and seeing what we got. Hopefully everything kind of fits and lines up. I don't know how I mean, the headlights fit with the fenders, so I don't know how the headlights are gonna fit around this part of the bumper, whether this is all out of whack or not. But as long as it fits somewhat decent, and then, like I said, probably get a professional to line everything up later. But let's go ahead and see if we can throw that bumper on and make it look half decent. All right, so I saved you guys and myself the embarrassment of showing you guys how I got the bumper on. It's a pain, and definitely a two-person job, but I managed to do it myself. It wasn't the prettiest thing, but I got it on there. This is what it looks like. I'm not too upset with it, guys. It lines up decent. I mean, it's definitely not no professional job. I still need to get some of these alignments fixed and gaps, and get somebody that actually does this day in and day out. But for me, just whipping it together, not really too body shop or body work savvy, I think it looks half decent. So I'm just gonna give it a little bath here, and we'll see how it looks all cleaned up. And I think that's gonna be it for today. Okay, so that's gonna do it for today's video, guys. We have the car running. I haven't really drove it too much yet until we figure out some of those other issues. It's got some weird weird codes that it's throwing right now. So once I get those resolved, then we can actually drive it. They're pretty, I don't want to call it serious codes, but there are a few codes that have to do with the like the timing and some of the other stuff as well. So like oil pressure regulating sensor or something. So not ones you want to be really messing with driving around. So I'm gonna get those ironed out first before we actually drive it, but at least for now it looks like a car and it's running. So if you like this video, guys, give it a thumbs up for me. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video.